Okay, welcome to this explanation of the ETC460 assignment on the digital media and tool portfolio. Okay, you've all got the assignment in front of you. However, for the recording, I'll just navigate to the screen on our Blackboard page, the digital tools portfolio, and up the top is our PDF. Each of you will be doing some practicum work throughout the next couple of weeks. Has your practicum started? Yes. So you've all been to schools, and whether it be social work or education, you're all partaking in a practicum. Our focus will be on implementing technology during this time. Of course, we also focus on teaching and learning. However, specifically, all lessons that you talk about in this portfolio will have something to do with technology. I'm just going to quickly read here. The basic thing is that within the portfolio, you're going to be submitting 3 different things. 1, record book, and we'll be talking about this in detail in a few weeks' time. And 2, teaching and learning tools. We'll talk more about this today so that you can go off and do it whenever you need to. So all 3 tools should be your own instructional design, indicating that this is an individual task. This comes through Safe Assign, so if the wording is similar to another student, it may get picked up. And you actually have to deliver these lessons in the practicum. I'm not there to witness this practicum, but there are ways to check, and we'll talk about these. The learning tools should come from separate lessons. So, for example, you couldn't use the same 30-minute lesson for both of the teaching and learning tools. Okay. For each tool, okay, so for each portfolio, you'll write a small tool description and use. Another section is the assessment and evaluation evidence, and then we'll get to the tool design as well. Each portfolio, when you submit it, should have a cover page. Okay, edit your work. Whilst language isn't taken into account specifically, if I can't understand what you're saying, then I don't know what you're saying. So language can impede my understanding. If you should be using references and citations, and these should be in APA. You should only write 2 to 3 pages maximum. So there isn't a specific word count, but it's 3 pages maximum. Okay, so each submission can be 3-page, so 9 pages total. That is not including the cover page. 3 pages of writing maximum. Okay, I've got some good news. When it comes to submission dates, I thought maybe I would get this to you a little earlier. So I'm going to push this back by a week. Please make note on your handout that the new submission deadline for the first learning tool will be November 5th. November 5th. Sorry? No, not the 26th. Nope. That would only be 20 days, and I'm not sure if that's enough. However, so you will submit 1 learning tool. The reason why you're submitting 1 learning tool early is so that you can get my feedback on it. Then you plan your lessons, and then you can submit the next learning tool and the record book on Thursday, November 30th. I'm not sure what day of the week November 5th is, if it's a Thursday or Sunday, but whatever day it is, the due date is November 5th, 11:59 p.m.
Sunday.
Okay. Should you be late, then there's a policy of 10% for each day you're late. Okay, so you can still submit it 5 days late, but you lose 50% of your mark for that submission. Okay. All right, let me talk about the 3 tools, okay, on page 2. Whether we're social work or education, we all need to keep track of student work. And a record book is a great way to do this. Have you seen examples of record books at your practicums before?
No.
Okay. So there's specific software out there, and you may use this at your future school. However, at a basic level, you could just use Excel spreadsheet to keep track of student data. Okay, so some things that you may include, okay, so individual student characteristics. So for example, gender, age, academic ability, learning interests, learning styles, okay, other relevant data like this. This might be good background information that you keep. You may have a pre-diagnostic test. Where are students at? You also would keep formative data in this, even if it's not for grades. You may be interested to know how students are progressing. Social workers, you'll do this on an ongoing basis with your interventions. Educators, when you have small Kahoot tests, how are students doing? Are they grasping the skills and knowledge that you're working with them on? And of course, you would use summative data as well. You may provide, and it would be a good idea within the record book to provide data, descriptive data like charts, tables, these sorts of things. These are good visual ways of understanding your students. Okay.
And KG1, they are very young.
Yes.
KG1.
Yes, they are. So we're going to talk more about the record book and working with early childhood. Yes, you will submit a record book. So we'll talk more about that later. It's due at the end of November. So we're going to focus more on the learning tools for now. Any general questions? Okay, so the next thing we have to submit is 2 learning tools. One is under the umbrella term of active and productive. This is where students are the ones active and productive. Then the second category is passive and content driven. This might be considered maybe teacher-centered work. However, students can still be active during it. Let me talk more about the differences now. I'm going to read the paragraphs and follow along, please. For active and productive, you're going to complete an instructional design process or intervention, activity or lesson in which students or clients are actively using a technology as a tool. Okay, you could be support meetings or more learning outcomes. The activity should help students or clients learn about a concept, skill, or behavior towards the desired outcomes. Search for a suitable technology, hardware, software, websites, apps, and design a set of questions or activities that students and clients must complete based on the concept or skills. Yes?
Should it be for a group or it's okay for individual?
Yeah, you can do individual. I know that social workers work on a one-to-one basis, and so your portfolio would showcase the work you did in a one-to-one intervention. However, students are the ones using this tool actively. It's okay if all students don't have a laptop or computer or a device. You could do it with a smartboard where students are coming up to the smartboard and doing something with it. Or you are working with it, but students are giving you what to do with the technology. This is what we mean by active and productive. Students are the one doing the learning. Passive and content driven is a little different, okay? You're going to complete an instructional design process for intervention, activity, or lesson in which the technology is a tool for delivering content. Okay, the lesson or intervention may include less student-centered learning with the technology. This lesson or intervention may include, use PowerPoint, Prezi, Explain Everything, Educreations, or any other multimedia tool to design a lesson or story for introducing a concept, presenting a problem situation to be discussed, or something else. We heard a great workshop today on Powtoon. This may be considered more passive and content driven if you make it. If students make a Powtoon, that's active and productive, right? See how the same tool could be passive and content driven if you make the video, or active and productive if they use Powtoons or Prezi or Explain Everything. Okay, so there's so many different software that you make. You must make the content yourself and design the learning activity. Okay, yes, you can include perhaps a YouTube video if you download it, but please, of course, adhere to copyright law. In general, you can reference the other person's work, and you can include up to around 10%. So if it's 10 minutes long, then that's around 60 seconds, we'll say 1 minute, okay? So 9 minutes would be your work, and 1 minute would be the work of someone else in your video. Here's a small table to distinguish between a learning tool and the type of learning that they're doing. Okay, so you could work with a video and a smartboard, and depending on what students do, it could be considered active and productive. If you do some group work and groups are coming up and using the smartboard, and groups are producing something. If it's more passive, maybe individuals are watching the video and maybe the teacher is using the smartboard. The technology is still being used, but it's used in a different way for active and passive. Lastly, okay, let's consider an ebook. Okay, students may create their own ebook in individuals, pairs, or groups. And maybe they use an individual computer or a teacher's computer. And this would be considered active and productive. However, passive and content, okay, perhaps it's a quiz or website, okay, individual learning activity with no technology, and there's a quiz at the end, and the teacher is controlling the quiz. This is more teacher-centered.
The teacher controls the quiz, but the students answer.
Yes. So the students aren't using the technology, but you are. This would maybe be considered passive use of technology for the students. So this is really the minimum. If you can't do anything else, then you can do something, and at the end you have a quiz and you're using the technology. This is a real minimum. I hope you go beyond this in your use of technology implementation.
There is not ability to use the technology in the class or to create a book for students. I think it's hard for them, or the devices in the school, according to the first observation, not provide for students.
Do you have a projector?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So think about how you could use this as a tool. Okay. If students could come up to the computer that's connected to the projector, then they could essentially use the technology. This would be a minimum way of students using technology to complete the active and productive.
So it's okay to share, let them to share by make an ebook.
Yes. So yes, I know that early childhood classrooms don't have technology, and especially not one-to-one. So allowing students to come up and monitor them while using a computer is a good way. Have them in groups. Maybe one of your activities, a group comes up and uses the computer. Other groups are doing different paper-based activities. And then when they finish, they can sit down and other groups come up. Even if it's to do a quiz, okay? Students are actively doing the quiz on the computer and then going back and doing something else. This may or may not be possible, but it's one idea. Please, let's talk further later if you are having trouble thinking of ways, and we can create solutions for this. Any other questions? Okay, so I've given a number of different areas to look at. You may or may not be able to write all this because it is 3 pages only. You do need to go in depth about some things as well as talking about some main points. What I mean is you should give attention to some of these points in each of the categories, yes, but in some of them you should go in depth and relate it to theory. We've done a little bit of educational technology theory, and for some of them, go in depth and talk more about it. As I said before, there's the tool description and use. In here, you describe your use of the tool, active or passive, and why, audience and their needs. Okay, why did you use this tool? Citations and reference list. Okay, this is a good way to include references in this section. Assessment and evaluation. Sometimes you should be assessing students, so this could be a formative. How well did they meet your lesson objectives, learning outcomes? How well did they do the skill, perform the behavior, or learn the knowledge? So that's the assessment of student learning. Okay. The second bullet point of evidence: evaluate your use of technology. How well did you use it? You may get student feedback, maybe a 1 question, hands up. You know, we did this today. Sophia, you did it at the end of the workshop. You just asked a few questions and evaluated the use of technology. Great. You could use observation notes from your mentor. Okay, what did they say about the lesson? You could include that as evidence. Maybe you keep a journal. So it's not necessarily during the teaching, but after the teaching, at night, at home. What did you do? Reflect on how well it went. What would you improve? What would you do differently? And there's some examples here. So your evidence is from 2 points of view: assessing students and evaluating technology and the lesson. And then tool design. Okay, where you're going to be designing both the active and passive lessons. So what did you do? How did you design it in terms of like multimedia? We looked at multimedia learning and used 12 different principles. We looked at these principles look at things like layout, sound, background, branching, sequencing, all these sorts of things. Cognitive load theory as well. You could draw on this. You could also bring about social and ethical elements. We talk about this from time to time. We will soon have a specific lesson on this as well. Those are the 3 sections you'll be writing about. I want to quickly look at the rubric. Okay, please note that tool description and use is worth 40%, assessment and evidence is 20%, and the tool design is worth 40%. So perhaps this is how you should divide your words or your pages. among the three different sections. You could write an excellent assessment and evidence for 2 pages, but you only get 20%. So is this worth your time and worth the pages? Probably not. Okay. There's a criteria for exemplary, and this is what I'm marking it on. I'll let you read through that in more details later. Okay, so any questions on the handout so far? Okay, well, okay, well, I've still going to explain a few more things, okay? The practicalities now. Okay, so what you should be doing is downloading these 3 things as needed, okay? So these are example portfolios, okay? So it's a Word document. You can easily save it as your own. Oh, you know what? I need to give you another document. I'll place that on there. It'll be a blank one of this. Okay, there's my cover page. And then I've got my example. Okay. You thought I was going to give you an actual example, but no. This is Latin. So I don't even understand it. However, you'll notice that I've put here Appendix A. And this points to evidence. Okay. So Appendix A may be a screenshot from a website you used. It may be a photo from in your classes. It may be some student work that they submitted to you. It may be a photo of a piece of paper that students wrote something on. It may be your mentor's observation notes. And yes, sometimes these are in Arabic. Doesn't matter. If this is your evidence, you need to write about it in English. Tell me what they're saying. Okay, I'll believe you. If not, I'll get it translated. No, I'll believe you. So within your example, you point to an appendix. And here's why. You can't submit photos in SafeAssign. So you need to submit them as separate attachment. So you submit all your words here, reference list at the bottom, save it as your name, your student number, and portfolio active or portfolio 1, something like that, and submit it to SafeAssign. You would submit Learning Tool number 1 here, due Sunday, November 5th, okay? I will give you a template to use. It will literally be the 3 categories, blank with no text, and you put them in, okay? I will upload it in this folder. I haven't yet. The appendix, here's an example of the appendix. Cover page, okay? Maybe it's a YouTube link. I'll watch a YouTube video. Maybe it's a link to the website or something you created. Great. Okay, here's a screenshot from one of my class. That's me with no hair back in the day. So that's my appendix. I've labeled them Appendix A, B, C. Okay. I know that sometimes you're not allowed to take photos in classes, interventions, and that's fine. If you are allowed and you're working with female students, take a photo of their hand. That's sufficient, right? The focus is on the technology, not what a student looks like or things like that. So I don't know whose hand this is. So it's quite anonymous. So if you are applying within the school's ethical or policies of the school, and you can take photos of students and their hands or from behind or something like that, then please do. If your school forbids photos, then please don't, okay? We need to apply and adhere to school policies. So that's my appendix. Where do I put this? For learning tool number 1, by December 5th, you need to place it here. It takes you to a discussion forum. Okay. So when you do this, you'll create a thread. Call your thread anything. So learning tool number 1. You can write anything here. It doesn't matter, but browse your computer and find the file and attach it. So whatever's in the file, I'll look at and consider it part of your assignment as an appendix. Okay. I'm going to quickly delete that and show you the example of my appendix. Okay, so here's the appendix attachment, that same Word file that I just showed you, and I'll look at this and take it into consideration for your assignment. Any questions on how to submit your appendix? So words you place in your assignment, it's maximum of 3 pages for each of the learning tools 1 and 2 and the record book 3. For your appendix, you place in any links to websites or videos or PDFs, whatever. You can place photos in there. You can put if students gave you a document like a Word file or made a video, you can give me all that in the appendix. You submit your text document here. You submit the appendix here. All by Sunday, November 5th. Later, you'll submit learning tool number 2 here. And your record book here. Record book is only 1 file. And that's it. So questions, got one question, was the record book? This is the first time you're hearing about it? Maybe so. Okay, as I said, a record book is a way to track student performance over time. So the sorts of things that you would keep in a record book is really class dependent. A social worker is going to be different to an educator. They have different things that they need to put in it. At the very basic level, it's a spreadsheet where you're tracking student performance. You're including information like student characteristics that would help you over time. Okay? Now, learning styles. You may assess student learning styles at the very beginning of your work with students. 3-4 weeks later, do you remember every student learning style? I hope so, but maybe not, okay? So this would be something you may include as a student characteristic. So you say, oh yeah, Amna, was she a visual learner or a kinesthetic learner? And you look back at your at your spreadsheet and you're like, oh, she was a visual learner. That may explain why she's doing better here, and we can work on this together. Something like that. It's a way to document student progress over the duration of your practicum. Now, I know that you may think, oh, I don't have enough lessons to keep track of things, okay? And that's fine. I also know that you shouldn't use real student names. You shouldn't use real student numbers. You need to adhere to these sorts of ethical considerations. At a very minimum level, you will submit a record book, and you can do it with example student data. For example, you could create 10 example students. Give them student 1, student 2, student 3. You can base an example record book on the types of things you do. But for example, if you didn't do a diagnostic pretest, you could create an example and pretend the marks that you create. What I want to see is your knowledge of how to create and keep records within a record book. It's not important whether it is 100% true based on the practicum. That's not important for me. I would ideally like it to be, but the most important thing is that you know how to create a record book. Does this make sense to people? We're going to look at, we're going to look at how to create a record book and the specific areas in a future lesson.
Do you have an example of record?
Yes, I do, and that's going to be in a future lesson. Okay. Any other questions? So, here's my advice. Does it look like a lot of work? Yes, and I agree. Sorry? Right. Why is it hard with the practicum?
Because it's just once a week.
Okay.
Not enough time, and students not until 3:30 they stay in the school. They left early. It's a short day to show day for them.
Oh, okay. Well,
Not time to go, not time to do this. That the medical teacher is only giving their lesson.
okay. So that's something that you need to bring up with your mentor. Are other classes also using the practicum? Like other university classes? Yeah. This class also uses the practicum. If your mentor teacher, you've only done one day.
But it's not all.
Okay, hang on. You've only done one day. So at some point, you need to start teaching. You need to work with the interventions. Okay, you need the practice. And at some point, you're going to need to use technology. If you've got a projector, or you can bring in your own laptop and use it, then this is what you need to do. At a very minimal level, maybe it's 20 minutes with a piece of technology could be considered a learning tool, and you do that 20 minutes. Okay? If your mentor teacher isn't allowing you time to teach, that's a problem, and you need to work with your practicum supervisor, maybe Dr. Edward, or who else is it? Lacey, Tabby, Gerald. Okay? You need to work with these guys and work with your mentor teacher. You need to practice. Okay? It is a lot of work. Your lesson planning, you may be marking, you're observing. It's only one day a week until 1:30, so you need to get organized. You can't leave it to last minute. You've got a deadline of Sunday the 5th and then Thursday, November 30th. That's a number of weeks. That's, I think, 4 weeks and 3 weeks. 3.5. And so that is enough time. That's 4 days. You probably teach for around 3 hours. As I said, 20 minutes may be enough to do a lesson. So you need to plan these out. Talk with your mentor teacher and plan when you can use technology and when you just do regular lessons as well. If you leave it until the 30th of October, yes, it will be difficult. So my advice is plan ahead work with them. This is one of the courses. You do need to use technology. If you are having trouble about understanding your technology and using it, talk with me and we'll sort these issues out together. Any other questions?
We have to space or same space?
Single spaced is fine. Yeah.
Sir, we have to record our voice.
No. So it depends on what you do. And you're talking about for the passive and content driven, right? So you may record your voice if you decide to use something like that. Powtoon, we saw a great 1 minute example of Powtoon, but you didn't record your voice, right? No. So your video may be just music, a little bit of content, teaching a skill, teaching mathematics, 1 + 1. I don't know, but so it doesn't have to include your voice. You may or may not. Any other questions?